Hi, today we are going to read Front Desk by Kelly Yang, chapters 27 to 29. Chapter 27. In school the next day, Mrs. Douglas gave us back our stories. I stared at mine, lying upside down on my desk. Please read my comments, Mrs. Douglas said. I took a lot of time writing them. I've also graded your stories. A hand shot up. Did anyone get an A? Yes, of course, Mrs. Douglas said. Well, did anyone get a C? Stop fishing, Dylan, Mrs. Douglas said. All around me, my classmates started turning their stories around. I looked over at Lupe and watched as she turned hers over, and a small smile escaped on her lips. I looked down at my own story. With a deep breath, I turned it around. There, plastered in red ink, on the very top of my essay, was a big, fat C-. 12. That's the number of exclamation marks my teacher used to describe how bad my writing was. Check your grammar! Exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point. Tenses, Mia. Don't forget tenses. Exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point. You need to proofread. Exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point. The little minus sign on the top of the page winked at me, reminding me that C wasn't bad enough. It had to be a C-. I stared at the red marks all over my story, a hot, bloody mess.
You'll need an app for me to help with that.
In every sentence, there was something circled or crossed out. Why couldn't I ever get the tenses right? I could hear my mom's voice in my head shouting because there are no tenses in Chinese. My mother was right. How could I possibly be as good as the other kids in their language? I should just forget about the essay contest. Who was I kidding? I didn't stand a chance. If I entered, it would just be $300 down the toilet. I stared at my classmates drinking in their glee as they proudly waved their stories around. I couldn't stop looking at them, showing off their grades, grinning from ear to ear. I envied them with every bone in my body. When at last the school bell rang, I skulked home. My legs like jello, my feet cement blocks. The words, "You are never getting off your roller coaster," played in my head like a news ticker. I stashed my C- story deep in my closet when I got home, along with the essay contest printout I had been saving. I thought if I hid it, I wouldn't have to ever think about it again. But that afternoon, the cable was acting up again, and Lupe came over. So what'd you get on your story, Lupe? I shook my head at her. You don't want to know, I mumbled. She shrugged. Oh, come on, it can't be that bad, she said. I didn't say anything. Who cares? It's just a grade, Lupe said. You should have seen my grades when I first started going to school here. But it wasn't just a grade. It meant I was no good at writing. And how was I supposed to win a motel if I wasn't any good at writing? Before I could help it, everything came pouring out. Lupe's eyes bulged when she heard about the essay contest. For a second, I worried that I had made a terrible mistake telling her. What if she applied for it herself? But then she reached over, took one of the guest comment cards, and scribbled something down. She handed me the card. I looked down at it, and it said, "You can't win if you don't play." I looked back up at Lupe, but it costs $300 to play, I reminded her. Lupe shrugged. My dad says in America you gotta pay to play, she said. I looked out the window and at her dad up on the roof, climbing down with all those thick wires around his shoulder. Suddenly, Lupe got quiet. "What's wrong?" I asked her. "Nothing," she said. I knew it wasn't nothing, so I asked her again. "I'll be sad if you move away to Vermont," she whispered. This almost knocked me over. It hadn't even occurred to me how she might feel if I won. She had to know that there was no chance I'd win. I just got a C-, remember? I thought this would make her laugh, but it didn't. Lupe just kept staring at the floor. She didn't even look up when her dad came in and told her it was time to go. "See you tomorrow," I said. "See ya," Lupe muttered. As she pushed open the front office door, she turned and said, "Oh, and Mia?" "Yes." "I hope you win." Her words warmed me to my toes. Chapter 28. When you've moved to schools as many times as I have, you start to think of everyone as temporary. Friends come and go. You might have a best friend, but you know in the back of your mind, she's not always going to be there. You'll change schools or she'll change schools, and that'll be that. For years I told myself that was okay. That was just the way it was. Kind of like replacing a toothbrush. Sure, you might like your old toothbrush a lot, but sooner or later you'd have to replace it. You'd get a new toothbrush, and it might feel strange and uncomfortable at first, but then you'd get used to it. I guess I never thought about how the toothbrush might feel. I never thought the toothbrush would miss me. I was walking through the motel, still thinking about Lupe, when my dad waved me over to room 8. "Look what a customer left on the table." I stepped into the room and saw a $5 bill and 3 $1 bills lying on the table, along with a note. "To the little girl who checked us in, keep doing a great job." $8, my dad exclaimed. "You know what that means?" I smiled. Chinese people believe that if you receive $8, it's good luck. That's because the word for the number 8, ba, rhymes with the word for prosperity, fa. It was such a nice surprise that I went back to the front office to write the customer a thank you note. As I got their registration card out and copied down their address, it briefly crossed my mind that maybe I should stop. Given the grade I'd just gotten in English, did I really know what I was doing? But then I thought about Lupe and how she said, "You can't win if you don't play." I now had $8 more to play with. $8 that I had just dropped down from the sky. I had to say thank you. I went over to Mrs. T's room to try and borrow a dictionary. Mrs. T was always reading. With her cat-eye glasses, she sat by the pool and plowed through at least 2 newspapers and a magazine a day. Not only did Mrs. T have a dictionary, but she was delighted to lend me hers. It was a massive book, almost as thick as the Yellow Pages. It wasn't just a dictionary either. It had something called a thesaurus, too. A thesaurus, Mrs. T said, was a list of words that meant the same thing as other words. You could trade them freely, like you can trade $1 for 8 Chinese renminbi. I carried Mrs. T's nifty dictionary thesaurus over to the front office and started composing my letter. Dear Mr. and Mrs. Miller, thank you so much for the $8 tip. Alone, crossed out, along with the good, crossed out, kind note. It helped my day. Cross that out. It made my day. And I cross that out, having a bad day. I got a bad grade at school. It was so bad that I was cross that out, thinking about not doing, cross that out, giving up on something. But then 2 things happened. Cross that out, happened. My friend from school said something nice to me, and I cross it out, got your note and tip. I think that's a sign. Do you? Cross that out. Don't you? Question mark. My parents believe in, cross that out, are big on signs. I'm not, especially if they are bad. but I like the good ones. Smiley face. Thanks for cross out giving me a good sign. And thanks for staying in, cross out in, put at, the Cala Vista. I hope you'll come back soon. Sincerely, Mia Tang, Assistant Manager. I worked with Mrs. T's thick dictionary thesaurus, trading words, looking things up, and learning phrases like big on and made my day, crossing things out and trying things on until at last I was satisfied with my letter. I copied the letter over onto a clean sheet of paper, sealed the envelope, and placed it in the outgoing mail pile. Then I had another idea. If Mr. and Mrs. Miller were willing to give me a tip, maybe other guests would be as well. Who knew? Maybe if I saved up, I could have enough to enter the essay contest. I called Lupe. That's a great idea, she said. You should totally do it. Lupe said everyone was always giving out tips in restaurants, even her dad. If he did an extra good job, got a tip from his customers. Except Mr. Yao, of course. Mr. Yao never gave Lupe's dad a tip. Not even on Christmas Day last year when he had to go over to his house to repair the cable. The tip jar would have to be a secret, though. Mr. Yao couldn't see it. If he saw it, he'd just take the money like he took everything else. I wasn't even sure I wanted my parents to see it. They still didn't know about the essay contest. If my mom knew, she might say I didn't stand a chance, and the last thing I needed was her telling me I could not do it. I hung up the phone and went to the kitchen where I found an empty plastic jar. I taped a Post-it on the front of it and wrote the words, tip jar. I added some stars for good measure. I put the jar on the front desk. I decided I would only put it out when it was just me. When my parents or Mr. Yao were around, or when I was at school, I'd hide it under the desk. I lifted the divider and stood back to admire the jar. It looked good there. I went out the back to return Mrs. T's dictionary back to her. As I was walking across the parking lot, I noticed a couple I just checked in, going up to my mom, who was walking back from one of the rooms. They were holding a camera. Excuse me, will you take a picture of us? The woman asked my mom. She grinned at her boyfriend. This is our first vacation together. Your first vacation? That's great, my mom said in her broken English. Vacation, the couple corrected. Anyway, will you take our picture? Sure, my mom said, taking the camera from her. The couple showed her which button to push, and I could tell my mom was tingling with excitement because she kept running her fingers along the zoom. Finally, a real camera. As my mom put her eye to the viewfinder, the couple hugged each other and gave her great big toothy grins. Eggplant, my mom said, except she pronounced it eggplant. The woman frowned a little. You know it's eggplant, said the woman after my mom put the camera down. What? Eggplant, the woman said, emphasizing the T so vigorously that she was practically spitting on my mom. I could feel the heat of my mom's embarrassment from where I was standing. If you're going to say it, you should say it right, and you really should be saying cheese, the woman said as she walked off with her camera. My mom just stood there looking so sad I wanted to run up to her and tell her, hey, it's okay. I just got a C- on my English story. I know how you feel. But I knew this would not make her feel better. It would only make her feel worse. It almost made me want to do more math. Chapter 29. Jason was back at school the next day. He hadn't been since the day in the auditorium. Mrs. Douglas still said it was because he was sick. I felt bad and was kind of worried about him, but now seeing him in his seat glaring at me and snickering with some of the other kids, I saw that he was perfectly all right. He just had a bad case of the I hate Mias. Slowly, I walked over to my desk and took a seat beside him. He and his friend stopped talking, but I could feel their eyeballs on me. I could feel them sinking into my pants. I had on a pair of these thin floral pants my mom got from Goodwill. I'll admit, they looked a lot like pajama pants. But they were $6.99 for a bundle of 6, and you couldn't beat that price. What a deal, my mom had squealed in the store when she spotted them. Your mom has the best shopping eyes. She had seemed so proud and so happy, I let her buy them for me. And they were pretty comfortable. But now, as my eyes slid over to the other kids, all of them in jeans, I wondered if it was a horrible mistake. I used to have jeans too. In fact, I boarded the plane in a brand new pair of jeans that my aunt bought for me in Beijing. But they were too small on me now, and a new pair of jeans cost $9.99, much too expensive considering how quickly I was growing. Since coming to the motel, I had grown a full inch, a fact not lost on Mr. Yao, who motioned with his greasy fingers every time he came over. See that growth? I paid for that growth. Hey, Mia, Jason said loudly. I looked over at him. He glanced at the other kids, who were all covering their mouths with their hands like they were trying to hold in some terrific inside joke. How come you always wear those pants? Jason asked. The other kids exploded with laughter. I shifted my body away from them. My pants, seconds ago so soft and comfortable, now felt like scorching heat. Ignore them, Lupe said. We were sitting on the grass at recess. I glared at Jason and his friends, who were sitting on the other side, cracking up and pointing at me. He'll get bored and move on to someone else, Lupe said. Somehow, I doubted that. And not 5 seconds later, Jason yelled at us from across the playground. Has she not heard of jeans? Jason hollered to thunderous laughter. That's it. I couldn't take it anymore. I got up, only to be pulled back down by Lupe. Ignore them, she said. She repeated. She was being very calm about the whole thing, annoyingly calm, if you ask me. If my cousin Shen were here, he'd be over there in 2 seconds. Back in China, if anybody picked on me at school, he would go up to them and give them a piece of his mind. He didn't care who it was, even if it was his best friend, a fidgety kid with glasses named Mo. Mo always liked to go up to me and pull on my ponytail, and one time he pulled too hard and I cried. Shen told Mo if he ever did it again, he'd pull his ear down to his butt. Mo kept his fingers to himself after that. I tried not to think about those memories. Instead, I tried to focus on the words Lupe was saying now. She was telling me about her grandmother in Mexico and how she was sick, so her mom was sending money home. That's why money was tight for their family. I nodded as I listened, trying hard not to look down, because despite everything she was saying, Lupe was still wearing jeans. And that's where we're going to end with the front desk. Chapter 29 done. Till next time.